A Victorian doctor leans in and calmly informs his patient she suffers from hysteria. This single diagnosis opened the door to one of history's most shocking medical treatments. We are about to uncover the dark and intimate cure doctors prescribed for a condition that was not even real. You will learn the full, unsettling story behind a practice known as pelvic massage, a procedure meant to induce what physicians called a hysterical paroxysm. This journey will expose the doctors who performed it, the flawed science that justified it, and its lasting impact on how society views women's bodies. How did a society known for its prudishness come to accept such an invasive treatment as standard medicine? What does this bizarre chapter in history reveal about the power dynamics between doctors and their female patients? By the end, you will understand how a fabricated illness led to a widespread medical practice that controlled women for decades. What other moments in medical history make you question the line between treatment and control? This diagnosis of hysteria was not a new invention, but an ancient idea reborn for a modern age. Its roots stretch all the way back to ancient Egypt and Greece, where physicians believed a woman's womb could literally detach and wander through her body, causing a host of ailments. They called this wandering organ hystera, the Greek word for uterus, and the name for the illness it supposedly caused. Hysteria was born. For centuries, this was the explanation. But by the Victorian era, the wandering womb theory had been largely discarded, yet the diagnosis itself exploded into an epidemic. It became the ultimate catch-all for any symptom a doctor could not easily explain. The list of signs was so vast and contradictory it could encompass nearly any woman at some point in her life. A woman experiencing anxiety was hysterical. If she was too sad or too lively, she was hysterical. Fainting spells, insomnia, irritability, a lack of appetite, or even too much of an appetite, all were potential symptoms. Some physicians even noted a tendency to cause trouble or be disagreeable as a clear sign of the disease. In essence, normal human emotions and behaviors were systematically medicalized. Any deviation from the ideal of the quiet, submissive, and cheerful woman was now a pathology requiring treatment. This flawed diagnosis handed male physicians an unprecedented level of control over women's lives. A husband or father who found a woman difficult to manage could simply have her diagnosed. The doctor's word was law, and a diagnosis of hysteria could justify drastic measures. Women could be confined to their beds, isolated from their families, or even committed to sanatoriums and asylums, all for failing to conform to rigid social expectations. Their very bodies and minds were deemed disordered. With such a powerful and frightening diagnosis now placed on so many women, the pressure mounted for an equally powerful cure. The medical establishment needed a treatment dramatic enough to justify its fearsome label, a procedure that could ostensibly reset a woman's rebellious nervous system and restore her to docile normality. The stage was set for a shocking intervention. The prescribed cure was as invasive as the diagnosis was vague. To relieve a woman of her hysterical symptoms, a physician would perform a procedure known as manual pelvic massage. The goal was to induce a crisis, a physical release that doctors clinically termed a hysterical paroxysm. In the stark professional language of medical journals, this was a simple mechanical treatment for a congested pelvic region. The physician would use his fingers to manually massage the patient's genital area until she reached a paroxysm, which we now understand as a therapeutic orgasm. The process was described with cold, anatomical precision, stripped of any emotional or intimate context. For the patient, however, the experience was a profound violation. Lying on an examination table, often under the instruction to remain perfectly passive, she was expected to submit to this deeply personal touch from a near stranger, all while maintaining the demure silence Victorian society demanded of her. The sheer absurdity is staggering. This was a culture that covered piano legs with modest cloths to avoid suggestive imagery, yet it openly sanctioned a medical practice that required intimate stimulation. The hypocrisy did not end there. As the demand for this treatment grew, doctors found the manual process to be tedious and physically taxing on their own hands and wrists. The solution they devised was one of pure, unadulterated technological innovation, devoid of any moral questioning. They began employing early mechanical vibrators, first water-powered devices in clinical settings and later electric models to induce the required paroxysm more efficiently. What began as a hands-on procedure was now being automated, turning a supposed medical treatment into something resembling an assembly line. This was not a hidden, illicit practice. It was openly advertised in medical catalogs and discussed in professional papers as a legitimate scientific cure. The entire system was built on a foundation of willful ignorance, where everyone involved, from the physician to the patient, was compelled to pretend that this overtly sexual act was merely a clinical manipulation of nerves. How did so many people participate in such a massive charade for so long? The answer lies not in the science of the body, but in the power structures that controlled it. The medical logic underpinning this entire practice was rooted in two ancient and deeply flawed ideas. The first was the concept of the wandering womb, an archaic belief that a woman's uterus could physically move around her body, pressing on other organs and causing distress. The second, more persistent theory was that of hysterical fluids. Physicians argued that a buildup of what they called female seed or other vital fluids in the pelvis created a toxic congestion. This congestion, they claimed, irritated the nerves and led to the wide array of symptoms labeled as hysteria. The prescribed cure, the hysterical paroxysm, was therefore framed not as a sexual release, but as a necessary medical evacuation, a way to expel these problematic fluids and relieve the pressure. It was a biological justification for a social control, dressing up prejudice in the language of science. This flawed logic created an enormous and constant demand for the treatment. Doctors soon found the manual method to be inefficient and a physical strain. Their solution was to turn to technology. The late 19th century saw the invention of the first electromechanical vibrators, devices specifically designed to induce the required paroxysm faster and with less effort from the physician. One of the very first electrical appliances ever to be adopted for home use was not the toaster or the kettle, but the personal vibrator. This was a booming market driven by medical demand. Manufacturers quickly realized they could sell these devices directly to the public. They began advertising them in popular home magazines and Sears catalogs, not as sexual aids, but as wellness instruments for relieving feminine complaints like headaches and anxiety. They were marketed as a path to vitality and youthful vigor, a convenient tool for a woman to maintain her health and composure in the comfort of her own home. This is how a device born from a pseudoscientific medical practice became a common household item, all while maintaining a veneer of respectability. The combination of bad science and clever technology had successfully perpetuated a cycle of control, convincing an entire society that a woman's body was inherently disordered and required constant technological management. How did women themselves navigate this bewildering reality, caught between societal expectation and a cure that was anything but? This so-called cure did far more than just treat a fictional illness. It systematically reinforced the very power structures that had created the diagnosis in the first place. By framing normal female sexuality and emotion as a medical disorder, the practice effectively placed a woman's body under the permanent authority of a male physician. Her own natural feelings and desires were pathologized, transformed from a personal experience into a clinical symptom that required professional intervention. This kept women in a state of dependency, constantly returning to the doctor's office to be fixed, their autonomy systematically eroded under the guise of treatment. The entire system was a perfect self-perpetuating loop of control. A woman who showed any sign of independence or passion was diagnosed as ill, and the cure for that illness required her to be utterly passive and submissive to a man's touch. It was a powerful mechanism for enforcing social conformity. So what finally caused this decades-long practice to crumble? Its decline was not sudden, but a slow erosion driven by two major shifts in thinking. The first was the rise of psychoanalysis, pioneered by figures like Sigmund Freud. While his theories were deeply problematic in their own right, they initiated a crucial change. Freud moved the conversation away from the physical body, from the idea of a wandering womb or congested fluids, and toward the hidden landscape of the mind. Hysteria in this new framework was not a physical ailment to be massaged away, but a psychological conflict rooted in unconscious desires and childhood experiences. The doctor's hands were no longer the primary tool. The cure was now talk. This intellectual shift began to remove the medical justification for physical manipulations. The second and perhaps more profound change was the gradual, reluctant destigmatization of female masturbation. For the pelvic massage treatment to make sense, everyone had to pretend that the hysterical paroxysm was a unique medical event, completely separate from a woman's own capacity for sexual pleasure. As this veil of ignorance began to lift, the doctor's role became glaringly unnecessary. If the same result could be achieved through self-stimulation, then the entire elaborate charade of clinical treatment was exposed as a fraud. The physician was no longer a necessary healer, but an obsolete middleman in a process a woman could manage herself. This connection between a bizarre historical treatment and the slow march toward bodily autonomy is impossible to ignore. The end of the vibrator's medical use was not just a change in fashion, it was a quiet revolution in gender politics and medical ethics, challenging the very idea that a woman's body was a problem to be solved by an outside authority. This entire journey from the diagnosis of hysteria to the mechanized cure reveals a troubling pattern of control disguised as care. For decades, women's natural emotions and physicality were systematically pathologized, their bodies treated as malfunctioning objects that required external, often invasive, correction. The decline of the pelvic massage was not a simple medical advancement. It was a quiet rebellion against a system that had long denied women authority over their own lived experiences. Understanding this dark chapter is more than a history lesson. It is a crucial tool for the present. It teaches us to question the narratives we are given about health and normalcy, to look critically at who holds the power to define what is sick and what is well. Are there modern equivalents, conditions, or treatments that disproportionately target one gender or group, medicalizing their natural state? By remembering the shocking reality of the hysterical paroxysm, we arm ourselves with a healthy skepticism, ensuring that the medical practices of tomorrow are built on genuine science and true patient autonomy, not on the echoes of outdated prejudice. What other historical cures or diagnoses do you find truly unsettling? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to join us as we continue to uncover the hidden stories buried in our past.